Okay. I'm assuming people are coming in now. Hannah, is that right? Yes. Okay. Maybe we just give it just a few minutes for people to roll in. It's always a little slow in the start. And I'm just going to express my thanks to all three of you for giving the time to MQ to share your experience of working with MQ and also your not inconsiderable experience in your fields as well. So it's fantastic to have such a brilliant group of people here today to talk about our 2025-26 Fellows Round. We probably need to have hold or lift music playing in this period just to allow people to come in. I don't know. Maybe for the next one we will be doing more of these particular supporters webinars over the next couple of months, particularly focusing on the highlight areas of this year's round. So I will put it down on the list for some light music when we start. Okay, so I think we've got a nice group of people coming already. So let's kick off. Welcome to everybody joining us online. My name's Chris Martin. I'm the CEO of MQ, Transforming Mental Health, and this afternoon we're coming together to discuss the launch of our 2025-2026 MQ Fellows Round. It's incredibly exciting for the charity to be beginning this work and for the first time in 2 years, starting to find some brilliant new early career researchers to support in the early stages of their career. So I'm going to be joined today by three fantastic supporters of MQ. Tate Kambeu, who is the Director of Operations for Equip Zab in Zimbabwe, and also the chair of the Global Experiential Board of Advisors for the GALENOS project that MQ is working on in the University of Oxford. So welcome to you, Tate. Kendelle Tekstar is a lived experience expert and an MQ Fellows reviewer. She's just completed or is just completing her MBA at the University of Birmingham and has wide experience with a clinical psychology background and as a coach and trainer with a passion for placing the human at the heart of workplace mental health. Welcome to you, Kendelle. And we're super delighted to have Professor Helen Fisher joining us. Helen is a professor of developmental psychopathology at King's College London. Thank you. And a member of the MQ Science Council, the brilliant experts that inform our work, and is herself a 2015 MQ Fellow. And her project explored the factors that affect the chance of children of developing psychosis and to help to identify and support young people who might be at risk of psychosis. So a brilliant panel. We will hear a little bit from me to begin with. Then Tate will talk us through just the importance and how lived experience works in research programs. And then we'll have a discussion between Kendelle and Helen to bring alive just how MQ's Fellows Rounds work and the impact they have on the careers of young researchers. So if I might begin, the question that the team were just giving me to answer was why do we need to fund more MQ Fellows? And the reason for this is pretty simple. The prevalence of mental health globally, poor mental health globally, has risen very steeply since the 1990s. Mental health disorders now account for something like 15% of the global burden of disease. And according to the World Health Organization, about 1 in 8 people worldwide, that's about 1 billion people, are living with a mental health disorder in 2024. And most worryingly, those mental health problems are rising fastest amongst our young people. And suicide is now the fourth leading cause of death amongst 15 to 25-year-olds worldwide. Yet, despite this, research into the understanding, the prevention, and the treatment of mental illness remains incredibly underfunded. In the UK, there are about 12 times more money goes into the research of cancer than goes into mental health. And what this lack of investment means in practical terms is that the academic capacity to find the breakthroughs in mental health we desperately need is just not there. So around 70% of those completing PhDs in disciplines related to mental health leave the field because they can't find the funding to continue. Now, 10 years ago, MQ was formed to address this. We created a unique grants program of MQ fellows designed to find and fund and support the brightest early career researchers in mental health, with the overall aim of increasing the overall capacity of the mental health research sector. Um, we quality assure their products through a world-class science council of leading experts in the field. We provide additional support to our fellows across their 3 years of fellowship to ensure that every fellow completes their work. And we work with them to ensure that the voices of those with lived experience of mental illness inform their studies. And crucially, that their findings from this work are promoted to the research community, to healthcare systems, to the public, and to policymakers to drive real change. Now, over the last decade, with the support and the help of our supporters, MQ's invested something like 30 million into new research, and we've backed about 68 MQ fellows, and 100% of those fellows have gone on to continue in their field of study, to build teams and build centres of excellence across the globe. For example, Professor Petra Vertes used genetics to improve the understanding of the biological underpinnings of schizophrenia. We've been with her since she was a postdoc, all the way up to professorship. And my favourite, Dr. Ethel Mpungu from Uganda, who developed a highly successful intervention for remote communities living with HIV and depression as a 2015 MQ Fellow. In 2020, she was voted one of the 100 most influential and inspiring women in the world by the BBC. So MQ Fellows really are the best new talent in the field, and they go on to do amazing things to move forward our understanding of mental health. And finally, now is an incredibly important time to support MQ's work. Changes in the political environment in the US that we'll all be aware of has meant that academic funding is harder to find than ever. And new digital technologies, data science and neuroscience, are offering researchers the ability to find novel and extraordinary breakthroughs that we could only have dreamed of 10 years ago. And our 2025-26 fellow round opened last week. We've asked to see projects themed around 4 key highlight areas, and that's children and young people. So we know that 75% of all lifelong mental health conditions begin before the age of 18, so we better be investing there. Digital and AI, how these new technologies can be used in research and new interventions and to deliver this type of work. Suicide and early mortality, obviously that's the big ticket item for mental health. We really don't want people to lose their lives, and what are the conditions that might contribute to their risk of this. And finally, eating disorders, which is one of the most lethal of mental health conditions and one of the most curable, and certainly one of the most underfunded. So those are the 4 areas in which we are asking to see people put forward projects to advance our understanding and science in this field. Some 490 young researchers have already expressed an interest in this round. That is the highest ever number we've had engaging with this program. So I'm really pleased to see that, and I'm really pleased to see MQ fellowships being recognised as not just an amazing opportunity, but a program of excellence, which will provide that additional level of support for those people coming through it. It's a real badge now to be an MQ fellow. And it's our job at MQ to ensure that these exceptional early career researchers have the funding and the support that they need to find new breakthroughs and build outstanding careers that fundamentally drive change in how we understand, treat, and prevent mental illness globally. And I hope you'll help us in that journey. Now, I could talk about MQ all day, but I'm probably the least interesting person in this room. So I'm going to hand over to Tate to talk to us a little bit about how lived experience can make such a huge difference in how research is conducted. So over to you, Tate.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for the lovely introduction as well. I'm excited and honored to be part of this movement, one that I believe is very impactful and very meaningful. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tate, and I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm honored to be here as a lived experience expert. And if you're familiar with the mental health landscape in Zimbabwe, you'll know that being a lived experience expert and being a Zimbabwean are two worlds that are not always very easy to mix. Resources are limited, the stigma is high, and the systems are often under pressure. But I'm here today proudly saying that I'm a lived experience expert involved in research on a global scale, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to share with you what has really enabled me to be able to fully be capacitated to carry on this role in the projects that I've been involved in. So, just a personal backstory of mine. So, when I struggled with depression, I struggled in silence, and it's because of what I mentioned about how the system where I come from does not really enable you to have a voice to really share about what you're going through, right? And I think that that feeling itself made my experience feel very heavy because for a long time I really felt that I didn't fit anywhere or that I wasn't being seen, I wasn't being understood, right? And that feeling of being unrepresented in the systems that are meant to help, I think is something that many people can relate to. So it was only later when I began engaging with projects that valued lived experience that I realized that my story wasn't just about pain, it wasn't just about the silence or the struggle that I went through, but it was also, it's been a source of insight and strength. And I think that shift from being a passive recipient of care to being an active contributor to shaping solutions was very transformative for me, both professionally and personally. I learned that lived experience doesn't belong at the margins of research, but it belongs at the center. And that realization has changed how I see myself, my value, and the impacts that I can make, not only on a global scale, but even in my immediate community. So I'm currently involved in a project that is called GALENOS, which has centered lived experience research, lived experience expertise, I mean, in sort of shaping the direction of research. And the lesson that I've learned from this is that research that includes lived experience is not about just ticking a box or following a trend, right? It's about creating knowledge that is rooted in real lives and in real communities. And when lived experience experts like myself help to shape the questions, to come up with the methodologies, the outcomes, asking the relevant questions, the research does not just generate data that is academically true, but it actually produces insights that can help to improve lives, right? It allows us to shape research in a way that it helps to meet people where they are and not where we think they should be or where we assume they should be. And for me personally, that has been one of the rewarding experiences that I've had, especially with MQ, right? So my journey with MQ has shown me both the excitement and the challenges of this work. There's so many highs that are involved, and I think we've also seen how there's so much talk of involving lived experience in research now, but the reality of actually implementing that is not as straightforward as we may think, right? So some of the highs that I've experienced are actually seeing how my perspective has helped to actively shape the research that we've been doing in the Galenos project. I've been able to see my influence in decision making in terms of strategy that goes for funding and even just how we should move forward with the project, right? And this is something that we've been actively working on with MQ's support, right? And these moments for me have been incredibly affirming, especially as someone with, the background that I have and stepping into such a daunting and scary space for the first time, right? But there are also some lows that are involved in this work. Like I'm saying, it's not the reality of involving lived experience experts is not as glamorous as we may want it to be. And it's not as straightforward as we may want it to be. But I think the lessons that we have learned have really helped us in shaping and evolving the project in such a way that it really empowers lived experience experts like myself to contribute to research in a very meaningful way. So I've really experienced firsthand the work it takes to change the current system and the commitment it requires to stay the course. And obviously, this journey hasn't always been easy, but it has been rewarding. And it is precisely during these challenging moments that the kind of support that you receive makes all the difference. So, what makes MQ stand apart for me and my involvement with MQ so far is that their support doesn't just end with involvement. It extends to capacity building opportunities, to mentorship, and thoughtful, intentional support that really nurtures you as a person, not just as someone with a particular lived experience, right? So you find that in so many other projects, you might have that need for lived experience experts, but they only look at you and classify you as your condition, and they completely forget about the person. But this is something that I've experienced differently in working in the project that we have with MQ, right? So by valuing the person first and the story second, they've really created an environment that has allowed us as lived experience experts to be able to navigate the lows, celebrate the highs, and fully contribute to shaping meaningful research. And through MQ, I've also seen that this commitment is tangible. It's reflected in the way that budgets have been allocated. Like I was saying, um, we have really been open to changing and adjusting how we had pictured or imagined the project would go in the beginning. There was nothing that was really set in stone, but it was a learning curve for all of us. And being able to change what's wrong with the system while working in the system has been something that has been valuable for us. So we've seen a change in how resources are provided and how the systems are designed to ensure that lived experience voices are not just sidelined. MQ really invests in us as lived experience experts because they understand that valuing lived experience requires more than just inclusion, but it requires that intentional and continued support, right? So I think for me, the ultimate point is this. When you invest in MQ fellows, you're not just funding research, but you're investing in people themselves. You're empowering lived experience experts. You're ensuring that solutions are not just clinically sound, but they're also very people-centered. They really speak to the communities they aim to serve. They really speak to the needs of the people that are targeted by the research that we do. And I know from my own journey how transformative it is and rewarding and really um, yeah, and rewarding how it feels to go from being invisible to being part of meaningful change. And it's through the highs and the lows and the challenges and the breakthroughs that remind me that the progress takes commitment, it takes courage, and it takes community. And these are all aspects that we have really been able to build together while working with MQ. And that's why I also deeply believe in this work and why I'm grateful to everyone who supports it as well. So we can ensure that research is not just about data, but it's also about people, about their stories, about their strengths, and their potential to shape the future. And for me, that is why lived experience, diversity, and real commitment truly matter. And this is something I can really say I've experienced with my journey with MQ so far, being a lived experience expert who has worked extensively on a very scientifically demanding project, but one that I've been able to confidently say my voice was heard as a lived experience expert. So, yeah, thank you, everyone.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Tate. And it's incredibly inspiring to hear that uh, there is a palpable sense that you've made a significant contribution, and also your contribution has been as a person rather than just a research subject. That's exactly what we want to see as MQ, and I think we are really lucky to have Dr. Leslie Booth in our team who drives so much of our the rigor behind our lived experience work. I think there are something like 5 or 6 separate projects in which MQ is driving the use of lived experience into research programs. I'd like to see a lot more of it. And for me also, just in terms of equity of the voices that are involved in research, it's incredibly important work which you're contributing to. So thank you very much for everything you've done, and I'm very, very pleased to hear that it's been such a positive experience for you and the other participants in Galenos. I will pass this on to Leslie because she will be delighted. Um, Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tate. I'm just going to move on now to introduce our panel for a bit of a broader panel discussion. Just for those watching online, you should be able to put, if any questions come up as we go through, please do feel put them in the chat. Hannah, who is behind the scenes and working the Zoom, will pick them up and make sure that the panel answers them if we have time at the end. So with that, I'll move on to Helen and Kendall. I think probably just to start, maybe I've done a bit of a description of your sort of LinkedIn description, but I'd like to know a little bit more about you and how did you get involved with MQ? Maybe starting with you, Helen.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm not sure my LinkedIn is properly curated, but yes. So, hi everyone. As Chris has said, I'm Helen Fisher. I'm a professor over at King's College London, and I was incredibly honoured to be an MQ Fellow back in 2015, and I can't believe that's 10 years ago already. But it was absolutely crucial to propel me on this journey to becoming a professor and leading a really interdisciplinary international team of researchers to really understand what it is that puts young people at risk of developing a wide range of mental health problems, and what on earth can we do to prevent them going down that route. So I got involved as an MQ Fellow 10 years ago, and had the pleasure to then get involved in a second project as part of a sandpit that MQ ran, where I got to connect with people I'd never met before from across the world, and develop a whole new project to look at adolescent depression in different contexts, and to understand how we can really move the dial on that and change that across different parts of the world. So that's something that's still going. That's a good 8 years ago to try and change that. And also, as Chris mentioned, I'm on the MQ Science Council, so helping to shape the different priorities of MQ. So yeah, it's a really fabulous organisation to be involved in. So thanks so much for having me.
Brilliant, thanks, Helen. And Kendall, how did you come? How do you come to be here today? I know, but you need to tell everyone else.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm a born and bred Texan who moved to England a decade ago, and that was actually to do a master's in mental health studies at KCL. And I pivoted into the world of business psychology. And I admittedly thought that I had left all things mental health behind me until I ended up in a business that was recruiting health, safety, and well-being professionals, and started to network in that space and got involved in something called the Mad World Forum. And back in 2018, attended one of their forums in London, and MQ had a stand there and was this bright spot of the clinical world, representing research in a very accessible way, getting some key messages across in the corporate world when chat about mental health was little to none. So I remember walking away from that thinking, I want to be a part of that. And MQ had meetups in London, and went and met other people who were like-minded and passionate like myself, and haven't really looked back. So I've been very lucky to be involved in projects of all shapes and sizes throughout the years, which I know we'll talk about in a bit, Chris.
That's fantastic. And I suppose the big question, and I'll start again with you, Kendall, is why is mental health research so important?
So I am a lived experience ambassador, and I had my first episode of major depression when I was 18, and I also suffer with anxiety. And I think it's important to say first episode because that is something that I do still have to cope with. And in some ways, I feel a little bit lucky because, depression, 1 in 4 people, that stat has stuck in a lot of people's minds. I think the symptomatology that I experience has gotten quite a lot of attention in terms of research. So in a lot of ways, I'm lucky because in terms of investment in research, therapies being available, all of these kind of things, compared to others, I would have a lot more choice. But that road was very rocky. I remember being put on every different type of antidepressant under the sun until I found something that worked for me. And essentially, depression did still a couple of years of my life as a young person. So, moving forward, I will continue to experience different challenges that test me with the problems that I face, and more investment in mental health research, even though, like I said, I feel a bit lucky to experience something that's more in the spotlight, will change the trajectory of my life in really meaningful ways.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's certainly something I've been thinking about. Quite often we're involved in discussions of the number of working hours lost, number of young people who can't go to school, and what it is to be living with lifelong recurrent condition, and how can we break that cycle, or at least allow the effective management of that cycle. So it's really interesting that you say that. From the academic point of view, Helen, I mean, I know it's your career, but why is mental health research so important to you that we keep pushing in this area?
So actually, I was gonna just carry on actually from what you were just saying then, and actually bring a slight lived experience perspective. So I haven't been very lucky not to experience any mental health issues myself, but actually my uncle was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 15, and that was back in the 1970s, so a long time ago. But unfortunately, what that meant was at 15, he was completely removed basically from society. And he never went back to school. He never went to get a job. He never developed any friends. He never went. We were talking about popcorn earlier. He never went to the cinema. He never did anything actually with his life. And he just sat at home, took very strong medication, and did nothing. And he died in his late 60s. But from 15 to his mid 60s, he just sat and did absolutely nothing with his life, which is just a travesty, just nothing at all. And so that really got me passionate about wanting to do research to understand how could we have prevented that from happening. Firstly, how could we have made his life better once he had developed schizophrenia? Could there be something we could do? And we know from research with clinical services that actually there's a huge amount we can do for the first time someone develops a psychotic illness like schizophrenia. So lots that we can do to get people back into education and to work to get on with their lives. So there's an amazing things there. But I guess I was particularly keen to work out how could we have prevented someone like my uncle from developing that at all? Because once you've developed that, as you were saying, Kendelle, but sometimes when you've got mental health issues, they don't just suddenly go away once you've had a quick shot of treatment. Sometimes they are with you for a long time and they keep coming back. So can we stop that from ever happening, that level of distress? So a lot of the research I do and what I'm really keen to push forward in my work and the work I do with lots of other people around the globe is what is it that puts young people at risk? What is it in their early childhood? So whether that be something internal to them, the way their genes are working, the way they're developing and interacting with their family, what's happening in the world around them, whether that be something in their neighborhood or the air that they're breathing, what is it that's putting them at risk? And then what can we do to really support them from going down that route and really try to prevent mental illness from occurring? So it's research really that drives that understanding that could then inform the treatments and the approaches that we take. So that's why I'm really passionate about doing that.
And Helen, do you think, so obviously MQ funds globally, we try to get the absolutely the best brains coming through our fellows programs wherever they're from. In our recent round, we've had applicants from 37 different countries. What do you think is the benefit of taking that global view, both on the issues and the talent which we try and push through our fellows rounds?
So I think in terms of the issues, I mean, certainly for me, as I say, I'm really interested in young people's mental health. You mentioned that's when the bulk of mental health issues start to develop and we can really push the dial most. And I guess for me, we know that 90% of the world's adolescents live in low and middle income countries. They don't live in the UK or the USA or or parts of Europe. They live in many other parts of the world. And so that's where the greatest burden of mental health is happening. It's impacting people's lives the most and their families and the economies and everybody in those spaces. And so it's really crucial that we are doing research in those places. And as we've heard already, working with people in those spaces. There's no point in me saying I know what's going to happen and what's important for someone in Brazil or Uganda or Zimbabwe or somewhere else. You need people from those locations who are really living in those situations and understand the cultural issues and what else is happening around them to really inform and push forward that work. So I think it's crucial from a perspective of the fact that that's where, unfortunately, the biggest burden of mental health is occurring, is in other parts of the world, but also that the people there are best placed to tackle those issues. And so really something like an MQ Fellows program that really is, as we've heard already, really supports people, nurtures them, and builds that capacity to allow them to lead their own research and take risks and move forward, is crucial to support people in those contexts as well.
I'm really interested. Obviously, Kendelle is someone that spans two countries and two cultures. What do you think the impact of that lived experience can have on shaping those research priorities or the approaches in the field of mental health?
In terms of specifically between the US and the UK?
Or just you have a very broad personal experience, both as someone with lived experience of mental illness, but also someone who's lived in two cultures as well. So you're bringing a
Absolutely.
lot when you as a lived experience ambassador.
It's been interesting because I've gotten to be a part of a variety of different projects throughout the years as a lived experience expert. And I don't know if I'm preaching to the choir with people who are on the call, how much they know about it. But I really do remember being a young person in my 20s and being very surprised that researchers wanted to know so much about what I thought about what they were trying to do. I got to be a part of a review of grants proposals from MQ Fellows and was invited to share my thoughts on how much of an impact I thought that those things would have from my perspective, whether the design of the study and the process of it was compassionate, and that all together just sort of changed my perception of mental health research as I knew it, as someone who used to be in the space. And I also, even this year, got to be involved in the MQ and BCG Welcome report that was released in March. I've been involved in strategy reviews, and those calls are, a dozen people. You've got someone in the UK, you've got someone from the States, you have someone in Africa, you have diverse groups of people bringing lots of different things to the party. And I think the ability to, there's so much that Tate has said that I've got a huge page of notes scribbled. I don't think I can say it better than her. But that inclusion and that diversity, and I've written a few things down that I'm going to repeat because they've really touched me today. You said not just academically true, but it produces insights that change lives when you bring lived experts in. And you said working with MQ doesn't just end with involvement, and it's not a tick box. So I haven't been on a call and felt like I was someone who was brought in to say, we included some people, tick, and the community, the sense of community, you end up seeing the same people, you're invited to events. I think community is MQ's biggest strength. And there was one other thing that you said that I have to feedback as well, valuing the person first and the story second. When you put humans at the heart of this research, so many things are possible. So I feel like I've just regurgitated a lot of what Tate said, but I don't really think you can say it better. That's why MQ has touched me, certainly.
Tate, do you just want to add anything more? It'd be a shame not to hear from you. In a way, I'd really like to know something where you had challenged a researcher and actually we'd seen something maybe you hadn't agreed on something.
Okay, so I think with my involvement with the GALENOS project, because of how it's, like I was saying, it's very scientifically heavy. There's a process that we have that is part of the project, which is triangulation. So it's basically bringing different sets of expertise. So there's the animal data, the human data, and the lived experience expertise together to kind of just find that middle point. And I remember the first time we had our triangulation meeting, it was a hybrid meeting. That was the first thing. And it was very difficult to really follow the discussion, because it then ended up just leaning towards the science part of things more than the human part of the research that we were doing. And I think that's one aspect that we've really been able to challenge in terms of having a co-chair who now facilitates discussions on the lived experience expertise side. So it kind of helps to balance out the discussion and the voices that are speaking in those meetings. So I think that was one process that I really felt was a great challenge, and one that I also wasn't sure if the feedback would have been taken on by the researchers. But I think it's something that we've really been able to evolve and change, and also just having the balance between the researchers and the lived experience experts in the room. That's something that has also really helped, and that we have changed in the project as well. So, in meetings and stuff, you're not going to have four researchers and just one lived experience expert, but the voices are really balanced out, and that's really an outcome that we had been pushing for a long time. And, of course, because researchers also have their own level of familiarity with the way they do things, there's always kind of that hesitance of trying something new. But I think eventually, after building the relationship and really getting to acknowledge the roles that each of our expertise play in shaping the project, I think that was one turning point for us. But I think those were the two challenging aspects of the project that I've had to face within my role.
Thank you, Tate, and thanks for bringing it both sides. But what I'm hearing in both cases is actually the important thing is a sense of mutual respect and honesty, which is allowing that challenge to take place. Helen, I wonder if I could if I could ask you to cast your mind back to when you were an MQ fellow. How was our fellows process different from other types of funding which researchers might be able to apply for?
So I think it's different in the sense that it is very focused on the individual, and as people have said, really putting the person at the center of what's happening and really investing in them and moving forward their research in these really key areas. It's a very different interaction. So when I came to apply for an MQ Fellows Award and went to the interview, I'd already applied for some other types of funding and gone to interviews, and they were pretty scary, to be honest. Everyone, either you never see anybody and it's just a website, or you go and everyone's desperately trying to kind of pull you down and find holes in what you want to do, which is part of an academic process, but is not a very supportive one, particularly early in your career. And yet when I came to MQ, everyone was just so lovely, so welcoming, so supportive, and really trying to find the best in everyone that walked through that door. What could they do to really nurture, to nourish you, to really help you move forward? What is such an important area of research? Anything in mental health is so important. And so really trying to find the best way to support individuals is a really key part of being an MQ fellow, that constant support. And I guess the other thing, once I was a fellow, was that actually I had a lot of interaction with the team at MQ, but also got to supported and taken to a lot of different organisations, whether that be HSBC or the Houses of Parliament, or to donor events and various things, an opportunity really to talk to people about research, about why it's important, but also more importantly to hear why on earth is this important to other people. What are the questions? What are the things that people out there are really important to them? What's important to their families, that we can then feed back into the work we're doing in research and make it meaningful and important. So that's just not something you get with other funders. You hardly ever interact with them. You don't get those opportunities, and that's been incredibly valuable part of being an MQ fellow for me.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Helen. And I suppose we've spoken a lot about the way MQ does it and the way lived experience is involved. Why does the panel think it's important to have these robust processes for facilitating research in this way? Kendelle, do you want to have a go?
I think there's maybe one example that's coming up for me where this could be relevant. Having lived experience experts involved in a robust way, being able to capture those stories, extract the really key points there, and then ultimately inject them into the design and how it's actually executed. Um, the the BCG report was really interesting to be involved in because that actually had to do with improving recruitment and retention in mental health clinical trials. So people were actually able to voice experiences that they had had being a part of studies and what led them to drop out of those studies, for example. Having all of that feedback, which would have been hours and hours over months, being able to then insert that back into the creation of these clinical trials, being able to have greater retention and have better results. I think that's one example that sort of speaks for itself of what's possible when you put the time in a strategic and in a thoughtful way.
Exactly. Helen, do you want to talk a little bit about it?
So I think in terms of the robust process, I think it's just absolutely crucial when you're reviewing applications, for instance, that you're getting those different perspectives in the room, because I think otherwise it's so easy not to fund what's the most important research. I mean, I think you can look at it from a very academic perspective and think, well, that's quite exciting science, but what if it means nothing to people? What if it's not going to make any real difference on the ground? So I think it's crucial that things like the MQ Fellows program and the other funding that MQ runs actually has, you know, an equal number of diverse voices in the room. So you've got people from a research perspective, but also people coming with their own lived experience perspective from different parts of the world, people from different disciplines and sectors, really deciding together what is the most important thing, what is the research that's really going to make a difference to people's lives out there. And I think, you know, having a process where you're really making sure that you have got those voices in the room and really shared decision making is crucial to make that happen. So I think that's a fantastic thing about this type of approach. And I just don't know how you would, you know, I would hate to go back. I think it's such an important way of doing things now.
Yes. Well, we have a couple of questions coming in from the audience watching. I might start with you, Tate. So we have one question really about, particularly for lived experience, how we ensure that there is a good representation from different people and different genders and so forth. So in your Galenos group, how did you ensure that actually men and both men and women were represented, people from different demographics and backgrounds and so forth?
So I think with us, in terms of our recruitment with lived experience experts, it was one of the main requirements was actually that we wanted it to be a very diverse group. So it's the Global Lived Experience Advisory Board, which we currently work with MQ is made up of people from the Philippines, from Canada, from India, from Nigeria, and from Zimbabwe, which is a very global kind of group. And I think that was one of the very key aspects when considering who would make up the lived experience experts panel and advisory board. And even beyond that as well, we also have an experiential advisory bank of people who were not able to be recruited onto the glebe, but are still able to contribute in different aspects of the project. And we also consider that the diverse aspect of things, you know, the culture, the background, even the lived experience itself, you know, we may have experienced the same condition, but our experiences are very different, right? And that's something that we have also been very careful and considerate of when taking on experiential advisors onto the project. So yeah, I think I don't know if that answers it fully, but that's just been the overview of how we've gone about that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tate. And Kendall, if you, this is a bit of a broader one from one of our audience, but have you found that actually men are quite as confident about sharing their experiences in as lived experience ambassadors, or is there bias towards women in your experience?
In terms of the people who turn up on the calls, I've experienced quite a diverse lot. I think it probably would come down more to personality differences of who would be more likely to chime up than others. I've met people from all walks of life, career backgrounds. There's a good representation of age as well. So I think it's quite an inviting and an open space to contribute. So no, I would not say that at least from my personal experience in the handful or so projects I've been involved in.
That's really good to hear. So one for you, Helen, coming from the floor. Compared to when you first received support from MQ, what practical changes have you seen in the field? And looking forward 5 to 10 years, what would you like to see happening next?
So I think the biggest change is the one that we've been mainly talking about today, which is really centering the voices of people with lived experience in the process, in who's in the research questions, in deciding where the money is going, where the research is happening, and that real kind of global sense. So that's hugely changed. What's happening in the last sort of 10 years, and I think absolutely for the better, and it's fantastic to see that. And I think in that vein going forwards, what I would like to see is that all of the MQ fellows in the future have their own lived experience and are leading that research. And that's certainly something we've been working on in other areas, is really not just bringing people to the table and shaping research, but leading research and making sure that people with lived experience and from different parts of the world are really driving forward the research agenda. So that's where I really hope it's going, and what we should be aiming for. I also think, as you were saying, I think there are lots of aspects of mental health that are even more underfunded than others, but also have a large amount of stigma, whether that be psychosis and schizophrenia, which I work in quite a lot, or issues with eating disorder, and particularly, I guess, related to the other question, eating disorders in men. A lot of things that people aren't talking about that really should be, and I guess also making sure money is flowing there, and we're working with communities in different, our own communities, with communities in different parts of the world, to really improve understanding of those experiences, so people do feel able to share their experiences and seek help. I think that's really crucial.
And I know, Kendall, obviously you work in quite a lot in workplace mental health. Do you think that there are changes ahead in the next 5 years or so from what we're now discovering through research?
Just want to make sure I've understood the question in relation to how research reaches the corporate world.
How research might inform changes in workplace mental health.
Absolutely. If I rewind back to 2018, the maturity of the conversation was reducing stigma. That's about as far as the corporate world had gotten, and that went around in circles for some time. And it's very interesting that it probably would have been a few years ago at the Mad World Forum that the conversation became more about corporate responsibility. And then things started actually being strategically embedded into businesses in terms of how they were going to address mental health in the workplace. And when you start making it a part of your core of your business, the evidence base becomes very important. So I think we've moved away from the tick boxy things, like I said, EAP, kind of the low hanging fruit, to roles being created in businesses that are linked to delivering on key strategic outcomes that will bring people into the business, develop people, promote them, put them in leadership positions where they have influence to engage in a way that creates a healthier workplace.
That's fantastic. And for me, as somebody who's come from a background primarily in mental health service delivery, I left with a palpable sense that without research, it was pretty much guesswork quite often. Some of the methods we were using, effective for some, not for others, but there was an absolute need to have a stronger research basis to the interventions which we were promoting and using. It was very, very clear. And I also, as I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, I feel a great opportunity with digital technologies to advance our work very rapidly at the moment. The GALENOS program that Tate is working on, a lot of the work there is delivered through their own AI models to read huge swathes of literature, which has been extreme. And I don't think it would have been possible to have done that even 2 or 3 years ago in the way they can currently now. The Helen, do you want to talk to the sort of the real world impact of research? Do you think how far is that distance between what we do in the university lab and what we can see happening in the real world?
I think it kind of depends which way, which part of the lab. Some of it's obviously much further away than others, but I do think, yeah, we're always on a journey to making that happen, and we do that mainly through ensuring right at the beginning we are asking the right questions and using the right approaches by talking to people who have real experience of the issues we're studying. So I think that really helps accelerate that process. I think we can also be mindful of, making sure we're, funding things at different points. There's always going to be stuff that at a very cellular level that will take a long time to move the dial, but it's important and that will take time. But there's a lot of work that happens much further along the cycle that moves much quicker. And I think some of that is, often, research can get very stuck, even if it's quite easy to translate. A lot of it's about having those conversations. And I think MQ and others are very good at making sure the right people in the room are as a researcher, I work not clinically, I work with general populations, I work in a very epidemiological space, and actually making sure I'm in a room and working, which I do in my other MQ project, with people who are clinicians working day to day with people who are experiencing mental health problems, and working with policymakers, talking to people working in different spaces in local communities, actually having those conversations, facilitating those, getting that research out there, getting people to think through that, and then bringing that right back through the process really makes a big difference. So, for instance, some of the work that I did as part of my MQ Fellows Award was thinking about how does the kind of the world around us lead to young people starting to hear voices, to be paranoid, so what we would call psychotic experiences, and some of that kind of slightly came off a curveball, which was that very high levels of air pollution can kind of actually start propelling biologically us down that route. And so there are things quite tangible we can do about that. And so actually using the research that we did within that award was taken to the House of Lords, and really using that to argue for reducing the allowed limits of air pollution in the UK, really driving that forward. So I wouldn't have imagined that when I started doing that research, that's where it was going to go. But I think there are some things that are very practical on a policy level that can be done, or it can be moved forward, and other things that actually are much more about really working closely with clinicians to make things happen on the ground or with local communities. So I think there is lots of different impact that can be had, but I do think really thinking that through right at the beginning of the research, and that's a really key part of the MQ Fellows program and other research that MQ does, is really thinking through what is the right question, what is the right way of doing it, but also how are we going to ensure that really does have that big impact in the real world.
And that's absolutely where MQ's focus has to be, and it's a fantastic story to hear that getting all the way to the House of Parliament. It's absolutely brilliant, and a lot of our effort does go into ensuring that these amazing insights that our extraordinary researchers produce do go into policymakers, into healthcare environments, for other researchers to build on, and for the members of the public. We have quite a challenge to continue to build confidence that actually the investment in this area will create real world impacts. So I could talk all day because this conversation is absolutely fascinating. And thank you so much to Kendall, Helen, and Tate for their time today. It's been an incredible view of what it is to work with MQ over a period of time as a guide and advisor, what it is to be an MQ fellow, what it is to contribute lived experience to MQ supported programs. So it's been really wonderful to, particularly for me, to hear all these wonderful views of our work, and that it's been such a positive experience and such an impactful experience to work with MQ. There are a few questions here with our just from the floor. Obviously, I highlighted our four highlight notices for this round: children, young people, digital and AI, suicide, and eating disorders. Those are the areas which we've worked with our science council and with the MQ team to identify that we think are these are the most urgent areas to work with. We will make subcommittee. Our process is we create a subcommittee with real expertise in these areas to ensure that the people that we select to do the work are both the most capable and are producing projects that we think will contribute most effectively to ongoing learning and to insights. So there is quite a robust process in there. If we get something else which is for an unrelated project, we will always look to see what else we can do with it. There are other mechanisms in MQ. We have a research impact accelerator, for example, that helps people to generate potentially a funding bid. We also, depending on whether people get through maybe the first round of the process, quite often they will receive quite detailed feedback on the application which they put in. Feedback might sound a bit difficult, but I'm sure Helen will agree. Sometimes when you're structuring your research, actually feedback is really a positive thing in the research space because it allows you to better articulate what you're trying to do. And we've certainly had examples of people where they have been very grateful, and that the feedback has allowed them then to subsequently achieve funding with somebody else. So we do look at everything that comes through and assess it against our strategic priorities. And then there's one final question as well about the underfunding in mental ill health in comparison to other areas. MQ, at the moment, we are looking to see where we can find strategic partners to drive more money into the area. I think it's going to be necessary. It's getting harder and harder to find significant funding. We will be leaning very closely on our supporters who've supported us over many years, trusts and foundations who have particular areas of focus. But I think that co-funding might be a way that can be really helpful for us. And ultimately, we will look to need to get the public more engaged in our work. That is really how we'll create the next step change in MQ. But for now, we have a great target. We have 4 fellows in the 10 that we are hoping to recruit for 2025-26 already funded. We have another 6. Each of those people will cost us around just over £300,000. So we have a £2 million target to get 10 fellows out for this round. I think you've seen just the quality of the people and just the impact these fellows can make, and I do hope you'll be able to continue to support us. If you want to find out a little bit more, we will be having a series of these webinars on the particular highlight round. So a deeper dive into why we've chosen these particular highlight notices. The first one is children, young people. It's on December the 5th. Everybody attending is very welcome to come and join us. And also, if you would like to support our work, we would certainly like you to. We will be circulating more information after this webinar, and the team will be in touch with you all. So thank you very much. Thank you to Helen. Thank you to Kendelle. Thank you to Tate and to the team at MQ who've organised all of this. And with that, we will say have a great afternoon and goodbye.